Yo, what up, guys? We're on the clock. It's another week of madness. And if you're noticing anything a little different, if you're returning for the 6 month madness series again, I'm joined by Trevor, not Julian today. And that's all right. Everything's okay. Just Julian taking the week off. And I miss him. And I'm sure Trevor does too. But we're happy to have Trevor on, even though Julian isn't here. He did participate in the planning and prepping for this episode. And we'll also be able to still get his picks for the weekly predictions. So, it's all as well. It's not like anything's really that different. We just don't do Julian's quirps, and which stinks. I do enjoy his quirps. How are we doing, Trevor?
Hello. Happy holidays, everyone. I'm glad to be on Six Months Madness and talk a little college hoops. Conference play is obviously just about to start heating up after the holidays. So, or I guess technically some of it this week. So I'm looking forward to chatting about it.
Yeah. Um, it is almost that holiday season. We're supposed to get some pretty crazy weather this week, so I hope everybody all around the United States or wherever on the globe you're watching it, you have a safe and hopefully a relatively warm holiday. Well, it's gonna be pretty cold here in Wisconsin for me. I don't know about you, Trevor, but
It's
it's
funny
supposed
you
to be
say
a
that.
negative time.
We got an update today. It's supposed to be 15 degrees the morning of Christmas Eve. So obviously that's unusual here. That's probably a normal Tuesday there in Wisconsin. But
15 degrees or around there pretty much every day. So
yeah, no, that's unusual for us. So yeah, hey, we're gonna be fine. We're gonna bundle up for a day and I'll complain about it and pray nothing happens. So rain
yeah,
wise.
yeah. It's just part of the global kind of climate that we're living in now. It's ever changing, ever we're not political here, but we could talk about that a different day on a different podcast. But
Yeah.
if you're not aware and you're new here, every week go through the top 25. And the last couple weeks, if you didn't know, if you have not heard, me and Julian are so superior in our basketball knowledge, we make our own ranking. And I mean, it also just because it is fun. So I'm going to run through that. I will list the team rank and their record. I'll probably just do it the quickest way possible. So bear with me. We got UConn coming in again today, this week at 12-0, number one. Purdue 2 at 11-0. Houston 3 at 11-1. Even after their loss to Alabama, right? Yeah. Did they lose to Alabama?
Virginia. There were so
Virginia.
many insane games this weekend. We'll
They
talk about
beat
it. But
they
yeah,
beat
Virginia.
Virginia, but
Wait, was it Virginia? Yeah.
I
Who
think
did they lose
Houston
to?
did lose to Alabama though at some point, and the
Probably. This non-conference schedule's been insane. I'll look it up
it's been
while you're
hard to
finishing
keep
that.
track of, to be honest.
Yeah, you're
Um,
right.
but Kansas coming in at 4, 10-1. Arkansas at 5, 10-1. Arizona at 6, 10-1. Virginia falling to 7. We had them 3 last week at 8-1. I yeah, I think Houston did lose to Alabama, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know. That's bothering me. But Virginia lost to Houston, obviously, this last weekend. That was our game of the week. We'll talk more about that in a moment. Illinois 8 at 8-3. Virginia Tech coming in at 9 at 11-1. Alabama 10, 9-2. Duke 11, 10-2. Miami 12, 11-1. Utah 13, 9-3. Baylor at 8-2, coming in at 14. Number 15, UCLA 10-2, Kentucky 16, 7-3, Indiana 17, 8-3, North Carolina 8-4 at 18, much higher than they are in the national rankings. That's kind of been the running story with us. The I'll give context to this because you probably didn't know, Trevor, at the end, but I know I explained at the beginning kind of how these work. But 19, Auburn 9-2, Tennessee at 20 at 9-2. We have Wisconsin. Go Badges, 9-2, 21. 22 Gonzaga 9-3, UNLV 23. They got their first loss of the season. They're at 10-1. The unbeaten Mississippi State, but they are playing right now. So let's do a little game check. They came into today at 11-1, and they played Drake, which has Tucker DeVries. If you didn't know, now you know. And Drake won. Mississippi State is no longer undefeated. Tucker DeVries, I'm assuming, had a huge game. No, he had a relatively, he had a wholesome Tucker DeVries game. He had 15, shot okay from the field. But they got it done on the defensive side of the ball, I guess. I don't know. Mississippi State has been a team that me and Julian aren't very high on the whole season, so they will probably be falling out of our top 25. But they came into to earlier today at 11-1, now 11 or 11-0. Now they're 11-1 at 24, and Texas, 25 and 9-1. So essentially, how we base the rankings is um it's kind of more of a power rankings than it is a like actual like rank of record or like how good the team is right now. So like for example, you have teams like it can have adverse effects to different teams. So like North Carolina, obviously they're not in the top 25 poll. But they're 18th on ours because we believe that they're probably the 18th strongest team in the country, or has the eight if they started the tournament today, this would be the 18th best team or 18th strongest team going into it. And it can have the adverse effect. A team like Gonzaga has not crept into our top 20 because even though they are 9-3, we aren't confident in their ability or their longevity. So it's our own little nifty thing. It's a little fun little kick every week to go through it all, and kind of just think about how things have changed and just kind of looking at it. Some of the teams that really rose up this week. Arizona State has been on a tear. They're 11-1 right now, and Ohio State moving in to 32. We do rank all 32 teams half the tournament bracket, and they're at 7-3. And we can kind of use this to segue our way into some of our conversations about last week's game. Ohio State played North Carolina, and that was a tough game. I didn't get to see it. I had exams, but I know that you were watching it, Trevor. What were your thoughts there?
My thoughts initially, my immediate takeaway was Bryce Sensabaugh is amazing. He athletically can do a lot of really great things for Ohio State, a team that I wasn't like super high on coming into the year.
Yeah, I thought Roddy Gale would be much better than he is.
Fair. Just to address the AP Top 25 comparison to you guys' rankings, I'm going to trust a blind monkey's ranking of the AP Top 25 over the way they do it right now. So I appreciate the thought process and the thoroughness.
Yeah.
Obviously, I trust you guys' opinion, but at
Yeah,
this
I
point,
mean,
like,
we have like just to put it in perspective. I mean, even for you, because I don't know, you have access to the sheet, but I
yeah.
mean, we have 94 teams on this sheet. We intend on
Oh
making
yeah, no, I know what's all
we
in there.
intend on
I'm
making
more
our
so
own version of the tournament bracket, doing our own selection Saturday instead of selection Sunday. It'll be selection Saturday on the Clock Basketball channel. And
I was more so making sure that the public understands that the AP Top 25 sucks. But
oh,
that
it's
was just more of
garbage.
my
I
yeah.
mean,
That
this
was
this
more of
week
my
they
public
moved
ploy
Duke
for that.
down. They moved Duke down, and Duke didn't play this week.
Yeah, there was
That
a
doesn't
lot of
make any sense.
inconsistencies.
Like
The
they're at
Mississippi State
11, they're
thing,
at 11, they stayed there, and then you
yeah,
just have to have teams move around them. Just their logic behind the whole ranking thing, they it's it's not
it doesn't
logical.
take into consideration things that did actually happen, which is stupid.
Yeah,
Anyway,
it's
Ohio
just
State
random.
thing, I think matchup wise were really tough for Carolina because they played the literal opposite, and Carolina just had to force themselves into either a smaller ball lineup or they just took Baker out of the game entirely a couple of different times. I think we got to see a good chance of what Pete Nance can do for their offense whenever he's actually don't get me wrong, he was missing a lot of shots in the second half, but there was some plays that they were running that consistently. Obviously, the buzzer beater, don't get me wrong, to go into overtime was great, but there was just some good set shots there that they were able to get him. I just think they need to be more careful and not force him as much. But I do like how he did look in the offense this game. Ohio State, I think, is just going to be a tough opponent for anybody. I really do like Ohio State more than I did 14 days ago, but
Yeah,
Sensabaugh is a big reason for that, and I'm trying not to let him
they've
cloud
kind
my
of
judgment.
they've kind of grown on me too. Um, it's hard to root for any team. It's hard for me, and that's where kind of my bias extends when I watch basketball, especially the Big Ten. I'm just not like it's hard for me to kind of besides Illinois and Michigan, it's hard for me to really and Michigan State, like just the rest of the Big Ten, I just kind of disregard. And I don't know. Ohio State's one of those schools that I often disregard, and I always find myself coming back around at the end of the season, being like, they were actually much better than I always thought they were. So this time I'm trying to get ahead on the trend. I was one of those guys with Malachi Branham and EJ Liddell that were in both in my top 25. So I mean, you know, I hope EJ Liddell comes back to some sort of um form of a basketball player. I don't think he'll have that same type of ability of like a top 20 pick. Um, without some of the athleticism, but kind of we'll talk more about Bryce Sensabaugh later on and just kind of talk about some numbers with him and kind of where he stands draft wise. But we'll keep it in college basketball. There's a huge slate of games on Saturday. Um, Obviously Indiana, Kansas. Um, Kansas kind of dogged Indiana. It was something that you know, me and Julian had talked about is that I said that Kansas's wing depth was going to be a major problem, and it was. I mean, Grady Dick had a great game. He's been really tearing it up, shooting the ball really, really well. I know you're relatively high on him in terms of draft stock. Um, maybe I'm not maybe not in the same place, but I can get behind it. I'm definitely higher on him than relative to where I'd say other people are. I think he's a top 20 guy. I think it's hard to make a case for him not being, um, especially with his positional size. I mean, there's a lot of underrated skills besides just the shooting that he brings to the table. I think if he was 6'5" and maybe a little less athletic, I think with the same level of shooting, I think there's no chance he gets in the league. But because he's 6'8", because he has good positional length, because there is some athleticism there, he can put the ball on the floor. And that's the underrated part about it is a lot of people write him off as okay, maybe he'll be a 3-and-D wing. No, 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 no. This kid was the superstar of his high school team, was the number one player in the state of Kansas, and would put his team on his back consistently. Being a primary scorer. So I think sometimes people forget that you have to look at the guy I role played in high school, and to pivot kind of to another game, talking about kind of freshmen. I'll talk about Houston versus Virginia, which was our game of the week last week. With Jarace Walker, he finally had a game where they put the ball in his hands a little bit more, and it showed. He stuffed up the stat sheet. I think he had 18. I know he had 7 rebounds. I know he had a handful of assists, 2 blocks, probably 2 steals or something like that. And it's the same thing with Jarace Walker. When you think about him as a draft prospect, you also have to think about like what type of player was that guy in high school, and what was he asked to do. We kind of talked about it with Stephen Gillespie on the War Room. You should go check it out on the Clock podcast. Spotify, YouTube, on the clockbb.com, wherever you want to find us, we'll be there. And we kind of talked about how some of these guys get held back, and it's kind of the similar thing that happens to a lot of players at bigger programs like Kentucky, but it happens like case by case schools where guys just don't get to show some of the things that they're capable of. And when they do get those opportunities at the next level, that's when we see them kind of blossom into superstars, with the spacing, and they're able to put the. And I talked about it actually with Julian today. We were talking about Brandon Miller, and we'll pivot into the next game. Unless you had anything to say about the Houston Virginia game, I kind of just rolled right
I
through.
was just more so for somebody who didn't need any Jarace Walker convincing. I was just happy that it was against a good defensive battle like
Yeah,
Virginia.
Caden
I think
Shedrick.
it's
I think if I'm not mistaken, I didn't get to watch a ton of that game, but Caden Shedrick is viewed as a really, really, really good defensive prospect in my opinion, and he was still able to kind of give Caden Shedrick problems on the other side of the ball, which is really all you want.
yeah. That's what I was. The point I was making about Jarace is that like I have the faith in the fact that he can do this against anybody, and if he can do it against one of the best defensive teams in the country, I'm pretty proud of that. So this was just like a add sugar to my already sweet feeling of Jarace Walker, I guess would be the way I'd put it.
Yeah, I'm relatively there on him. I mean, you can see my board now, and now I can see yours a little bit. You put a little bit in there.
Be out on January 1st.
Yeah,
So looking forward to it.
I don't mind it. I'll be waiting.
Julian and I are perfectly aligned on it for what it's worth. So it's
Yeah. I
yeah,
mean,
it is what it is.
I'm just a little bit lower because of the jump shot. And I
Yeah,
need some time to
fair.
differentiate which of these other guys that are in this top 15 has the best chance of becoming a superstar. Because that's at the end of the day, that range I really believe is the home run swinging range, which is the lottery. You know what I mean? That's why they call it the lottery, not only because
Yep.
it is a literal lottery, but you're you're kind of swinging for the fences with a
Taking a big
lot of those
chance.
picks. It's very rare when teams really like settle for a pick in the top 10, especially, and nonetheless the top 15 picks or 5 picks. You know, what I mean, that's the range we're really talking about with Gerace is 5. Can he be a top 5 pick because he has those type of physical tools, and he's shown in high school that if he's a jump shot away from being one of the best players, you know, in the country.
Yep.
So,
I have a perfect
um,
segue for you. Brandon Miller's a guy that
yeah,
talking about the next game on the list. I hear we're looking at here. Talking about, I know he just had 36, but this is just going to be the first time publicly that the brakes are still pumping for me on him because I think there's a lot to be desired
yeah,
outside of the shooting and the scoring. If it's inside the 3-point arc, it makes me a lot like pretty nervous. I don't want this to turn into a
yeah.
draft show if it doesn't need to be, but I really do like what he put up against Gonzaga. They're a great team, and there are still some things to be desired even in a 36-point
Yeah,
performance.
absolutely. I think that's completely valid, and they lost the game.
Yep,
I think that's the most important note is that they lost.
they did.
That means he's got to do more on the defensive side of the ball. You can't be getting into shootouts where you. I mean, they lost. How many points was combined scored? 190, right?
Yeah, it was 100 to whatever
I'm saying
Alabama
like
had in the
most of them,
90s.
like
Yep.
that's not that's not college basketball. You know what I mean? That's a
It's
track.
not going to win in March either,
That's a
to be
track
fair.
meet. So
Yep.
what I say, you know, what I would say in Brandon Miller's case is, you know, he did score 36 points. I think that from top to bottom, you know, Gonzaga's team. I mean, I don't think they're more talented, but they're definitely more experienced, and they're more experienced playing with each other. I think that this Alabama team lacks a lot of maturity. Um, Especially at their leadership positions. I think that just this is Brandon Miller's basketball team, and I think that you know he's able to do what he wants to. No clown, he's coming around, but I just don't think he's that. I don't think he's a first round pick. Um, but the thing that I will say about Brandon Miller, you know, I just talked about high school film and talking about him in the perspective of a draft prospect, which I think we'll get to later. I don't want to have this conversation now. I think we need to just cruise through his next couple games, but we'll get that and the Bryce Dunstable thing. We'll both come back to. But I felt your points were about Jairus were valid, but I thought it was very interesting that they still lost that game and it was so high scoring. I didn't get to watch it. I just watched some of Brandon Miller's clips, and some of the misses inside are just I have an explanation. Tennessee versus Arizona. Um, Arizona won. They smacked Tennessee. I again just want to reiterate on this podcast that we are not believers in Tennessee. They continue to be the most overhyped and disappointing team, at least in terms of top 10 rankings in college basketball, in my opinion. They haven't played anybody all year, and anytime they play anybody good, they just do not look on par. And UCLA versus Kentucky, the only thing I have to say is Jalen Clark, and we'll talk about him more later. The rest of the weekend was in college basketball was slow. You know, the last 2 days have been slow. There's a good slate of games on tonight and tomorrow. And we'll get to some of those in the predictions. Um, did you have any thoughts about the UCLA Kentucky game or Tennessee Arizona?
UCLA Kentucky, no, because I still that it's on my to do list of things to watch tonight because I have been trying to catch up on some of the stuff this weekend. This is my public service announcement to everyone who is listening to this or will listen to this. Do your Christmas shopping before the weekend before Christmas, so you're not stuck like I was catching up on games because doing other things. So, college basketball is awesome the week before Christmas. In the other regard, though, the Arizona thing, I kind of flip flopped on these two in terms of this year, last year. Like I was so high on Tennessee last year, thought they were a Final Four team, all this stuff, right? And they obviously weren't a bad team. They made it as far as they could have for the circumstance. But I think I flipped and where I'm like, okay, last year or this year I wasn't that high on Arizona, similar team in terms of ranking preseason, and Arizona looks really, really good, and they're beating the crap out of guys. I also just love the international presence with Arizona. They've just kind of made it a point to have what I think is 8 of their top 11 guys that play are from outside the United States. It's just neat to see. So
Yeah,
it's just more of a cool
they
thing about
recruit
Arizona.
incredibly well overseas. And I
Tennessee's
think it's
overrated. Arizona's not.
you know, it's a winning style basketball. A lot of those guys play a very, very efficient and effective brand of basketball that involves taking care of the ball and rebounding, which are
Yep.
two things that I love. So, I
Two things
mean,
that Tennessee couldn't do well either, which is I
yeah,
think
I
why they
mean,
got killed.
Tennessee can't share the ball. They can't shoot from outside. And they can't rebound. So how are you going to win games? Um, Mid-major performers, Slauson and Bothwell, you get to see in person versus NC State. I know that said that you didn't really get many inferences from Bothwell, but I know you have some thoughts about Slauson. We've talked about him a handful in this segment, especially.
I'll plug I'll plug the Stephen Gillespie conversation more because I said a lot in there, a lot more than I planned on before I released my board. That's a hint. But Slauson, I think, regardless of what people think of the shot, what I really
He went
enjoyed
4 for 7
seeing.
from three yesterday.
Yeah, we did, and it's there.
Bounce
It's
back.
inconsistent at best, and that's I had to take into consideration the one game I saw to understand what I was going to get, especially when I get a chance to scout in person. I always take with a grain of salt, and I go, okay, I'm going to see the best of what this person can do right now, and sometimes I'm going to see the worst. It just depends on situationally
Yeah. I
what
mean, he's
what you're going
shooting
to see
36.8% on the season.
from
He's
three.
been shooting. Yeah.
That's a lot higher than I realized. Okay,
Yeah.
interesting.
So, I mean, and I think that's a key thing with him. He's averaging 15, 7, 4, 2, and 2 on, 56, 36, and 72. I think I
So
looked at it earlier.
regardless of even regardless of what he's shooting, the way I look at it was okay. When in person, what am I going to see is something I can. I'm looking for things that I can't see
Athleticism,
on
I
film.
think, is the biggest.
Athleticism, right? I'm looking for how a guy moves without the ball. Things that on film I'm not going to see as much, but athletically I know what I'm going to get. But then you see a guy like him and you go. I mentioned the thing about catching the ball outside the square. People can go listen to it. It's out there. It's awesome. But just there's some things that he can do athletically and off the ball that I just think are there and I think are NBA level talents. As somebody who covers the NBA more than anything, I really do see NBA value in him. He reminds me a lot of Herb Jones, even though Herb Jones obviously is a way more capable shooter. And that's not a fair and easy comp, but it's just to give you a visualization of what I think he can be intangibly. So I'm excited about the kid, and I would like to hopefully see him one more time. I think they go. They're in South Carolina. They play a couple of teams in North Carolina, and I think they play a couple of teams, obviously in South Carolina.
Yeah, I mean,
So I'll see
the
what happens.
Paladins are out there. They're out in that part of the country.
Hopefully, I'll get a
They've
chance.
played
But
South Carolina State. Both teams that they beat. Um, Jelly Walker for UAB. He was making his way around social media last night. He had like a LaMelo ball, corner where he caught it, dribble, spin, or like spin the other way away from the guy, shoot the three, just absolute net, and kind of talked a lot of smack on walking on his way back towards the camera. He's him. I mean, he's the nation's leading scorer. I don't know if you've gotten a chance to watch Jelly Walker, Trevor. 5'11" guard, quick as can be, probably the fastest player in college basketball. Probably has the smoothest jumper, the smoothest name, and the smoothest layup package. Um, you know, he's he is probably like he's probably my favorite basketball player to watch right now. Um, it just like the things he can do on the court, like he just runs. He reminds me of like the way he plays basketball in college. Not to compare him to Isaiah Thomas, but like some of those like 19 early like mid 1980s clips of Isaiah Thomas kind of running around, dribbling the ball, scoring the ball in the mid range and stuff like that. That's how Jelly Walker it is, but it's more like modern, so it's just pushed out to three. Otherwise, he just kind of runs around in space out there. Um, we've talked about him a handful of times, but I just have to continue to give that guy his props. I mean, he is truly like the most consistent scorer in college basketball. I did want to keep the mid-major performers kind of short this week because I knew that we had other stuff to talk about. But I do have to shout out Jake Stevens for Chattanooga. He is currently one of the most efficient players offensively in college basketball, just by most advanced metrics. He's probably a guy that shows up on a lot of your queries or whatever you use for your advanced analytics research. If you're an analytics guy. But so this 7 game stretch, I just want to put this in perspective, Trevor. This guy's a 7-footer, smooth jumper, looks really good. Like it's an actual jump shot on a 7-footer, which is something that you really don't get. But this 7 game stretch that they had, team went 6-1, which is most important to me. But listen to these numbers. In 33.6 minutes, he's averaging 26 points per game, 11.9 rebounds, 3.9 assists, 3.4 blocks, 1.3 steals per game on 58.3% shooting field goal percentage and 50% from three. And I'll tell you how many 3-point attempts he had for a 7-footer. This is incredible. Just he is shooting shot 19 for 38 in a 7-game stretch for a 7-footer.
Yeah, unfortunately, I'm not watching much Chattanooga basketball, but no.
I
Anytime
am.
you tell me that, anytime someone tells me that, even if it wasn't a 7 footer, if somebody at any point in a 7 game stretch put something like that up, like that's impressive. I don't care what anyone says. 26,
Yeah.
11, and even intangibly, still
26,
seeing
12,
defense.
4. I mean, if you're
Yeah,
rounding up, like these
yeah.
numbers are like, I
And I
mean,
typically round down on stuff like this. And obviously, field goal percentage, it's hard to round down 58%. That's the part that stuck out to me was the field goal percentage. Doing it efficiently, right? Like not just beating these teams that they're playing, whoever they're playing in that 7 game stretch, but if
yeah,
they're
they
doing it
played. I
well.
mean, if you're familiar with Ken Palm, they played three teams that were ranked B
Mm-hmm.
competition and one team that was ranked A. So basically,
Nice.
one
Yeah.
really, really competitive team that they probably should have lost to, I think, and it was a game that they won. Then they lost to one team that was about even with them. They beat two teams that were decent, and I think they lost a couple games that were, or they won a couple games that were just mediocre teams.
Okay. Either way,
Um,
gotta put some stuff stats like that. That's impressive.
yeah. So stocks on the rise. We talked about it earlier. Bryce Sensabaugh, 22-point game versus UNC. Some of his clutch scoring ability and some of his athleticism was really popping to a lot of people. Definitely a big staple game for him. He's been having a great season though. I wanted to make sure that, everybody didn't kind of chuck it up to one game. Um, you know, just I used Ken Palm for today's research. Sorry guys. Didn't get on Synergy today. It was just Ken Palm. 121.3 offensive rating on 29.6% usage. That's top seven in the country on that type of usage, in the top group of 28% or more qualifying. So he's putting up numbers that are not not common in college basketball, especially from a freshman. Um, we'll talk about the Brandon Miller thing. I think this is a good place to stop kind of for a little conversation. Kind of talking about the things we were before. I know that a lot of people are kind of chucking him up to be kind of just a shooter. And this is a part where I think that if you're just somebody who watches college basketball and you're not really like somebody who does preseason draft work, especially leading up to the season, um, like going back and watching like a high school film as it's coming out, like watching the, Peach Jam, watching the EYBL tournaments and stuff like that. And, in the Peach Jam final, he, one thing that was the biggest game that I enjoyed watching, like of his competition wise, because he went up against Jalen Duren, Nick Smith Jr., and Derek Lively, and he only had like I think he had a Otega Owe on his team. It was the only player that I really remember off the top of my head, but um, he his ability to play make and finish around the basket is what impressed me more. He didn't really shoot a lot of threes. I honestly thought coming into the season that he was going to have to shoot better. Like that was going to be the one area of his game that he needed to improve. And it's the only thing he's doing right now. And I chuck it up to the fact that a lot of the spots on the floor that he's open right now, he's never been open in them before. So he's not really got the reps, the shot making reps in that pull up mid range area where he's getting it. He's used to more of tightened in, having, all these people between him and the basket. And he couldn't finish through them before. So he's not going to be able to finish through just one guy now. He doesn't have that type of reps on those type of plays. And that's, I think, the biggest thing is that he's going to have a curve when he hits he's 20, he's going to be 20 years old. I think he's already 20 years old. He's exactly 1 year younger than me. We have the same birthday. So, happy belated Brandon. We have the same last name and the same birthday. Um, but like he's going to be, by the time he hits 22, that frame will have filled out. He'll have gotten all these reps in these types of situations. He's getting pick and roll ball handler reps at 6'9". So I think that a lot of people need to cool off on kind of how volatile the conversation is and let the kid just kind of develop and let's see what happens because he could be a really, really unique basketball player. And I just think people are so pressed because there's so many wings in this draft, Trevor. There's so many wings in this lottery. Like
I'm learning
I
that the
tried
hard way.
counting. I tried counting the wing prospects. Like I did like a little sorting. I'm obsessed with just doing little like research bits within the same crop of players on that draft board. And like I looked at it and I'd like tried to grade people positionally, like so gave them positional rankings at one point in the board. And it was like before I had gotten to 10 centers, I'd already had 35 wings or something like that.
Yep. Look, I think I have 2 centers in my entire first round. So if that makes you feel
That's
any
what
better.
I'm saying. It's unbelievable.
I think
Um,
this is an appropriate time for the conversation because he just had a really big game, and I think a lot of the stuff you said is valid, and I think it's definitely a deeper conversation that needs to be had, not just around Brandon Miller, but just around the type of prospect that he is. I think we got kind of caught in last year in the guys like Usman Jang, and people fell in love with him. You're Jalen Williams, who is a perfect version of him, who developed well, and you got to see immediately an impact on an Oklahoma City Thunder team. Ironically enough, they went to the same place, and they're both doing impactfully not that bad, right? They're both doing really really good things. I think it's also ironic to talking about Brandon Miller, where they are only up 9 at home against the 1-10 Jackson State Tigers, and Brandon Miller has 5 points, 2 for 5 from the field, 1 of 3 from three, 12 rebounds, 2 assists, and 2 fouls. So a completely inconsistent turnaround from what the other day was, and that's why I think that's the kind of it's almost a testament to what you talked about. He's that kind of player, and you're going to have these games against, unfortunately, in this case, against a 1-10 Jackson State team. So
yeah, and
he's
I
going to
just
do that
think
against the
that
Thunder, and he's going
you
to do
have
that
to
against the
remember that he's
Nuggets.
20 years old and that we're
Right,
drafting a guy for his next 10 years, not his last 10 games.
right, and I
That's I
think this is a
think
good
that
example.
yeah. So I want to keep going kind of in this same vein. I'm just bouncing around my list if you couldn't tell here, Trevor. Jalen Clark is a guy that I kind of have in that same range as Bryce Sensabaugh and Brandon Miller on my board, and I'm probably the only one. Um, and it's because of the defensive stuff. I think that at 6'6", he's able to defend 1 through 4, and has great length, good hands, great activity. Has that mixed experience, maturity, that IQ, can play on in the pick and roll defense, guarding the ball handler, can play drop coverage, can play switch all, can play off ball, defense, read passing lanes. And then on top of it, this year though, he's stepped up a lot in the offensive efficiency. So he's 11th right now in offensive rating for at least 20 possessions used. So that means like out of everybody in the country that has a higher usage rate of 20, he's 11th, which I mean is it's higher than Bryce Sensabaugh. Um, and one of the things that I think is most important is how well he's finishing around the basket. Last time I'd looked at it, he was finishing around the basket at like an 80%, like near 80% rate. Um, you know, Mid to high 70s, I'm sure by now, maybe even low 70s after the last couple games. But I think he's still been on a tear, if I'm not mistaken. I think he had 24 points the other night, and I think he had a good game against Kentucky. So this is a guy that I kind of really want to etch out there, and kind of hitch my wagon to, not not claiming a prospect, but trying to just I think he doesn't get the respect that he deserves, especially talked about, just because of his age, being a junior. I think that this happens every single year, Trevor, where guys just don't get talked about. The conversation never gets going until it's too late on these guys that are 21, 22 years old. And they only hear about him in the tournament because, oh, this guy's actually really good and he's helping lead his team to a championship or leading his team to a Final Four appearance. And then people want to tune in. I think that, we have to look at the numbers for what they are and look at what they do in individual matchups. And UCLA's had one of the toughest schedules out of these top 25 teams coming in. And they've not shied away from playing really good teams. So, it's just sometimes is what it is. I don't know if you had anything to say about Jalen Clark. But
No, it's somebody I want to spend a little bit more time on because I'm there with you. Like I get their schedule's been really tough, and I'm going to take that with a grain of salt.
yeah,
I
they
want to see
played
how
some
he
really bad
plays.
teams and they played some really good teams. I
I think
think,
the Pac-12 is pretty poor this year, so I'd like to see how well he takes over in the Pac-12 play. So hopefully he continue to do that.
yeah, I think that worst case scenario, um, him and Kaluma are kind of in the same area of the draft. I think late 20s. I think late first rounds the stopping point though that I can see a logical. I don't know. I just don't know how an NBA GM could look at themselves seriously if they didn't take this guy who has all these raw intangible skills that are like at the premium of wing players in the NBA now. They're all guys that can get to the hoop effectively when they need to, put the ball on the floor, share the rock, shoot the open jumper, have plus size, and have plus length defensively. I mean, those are what most of the superstars in the league are. So, and to back those players up, you have to get same players in the same vein. to have the same effectiveness when you're building teams around him. I think Jalen Clark is a guy that, projects as a really good backup or even into a high level starter. And I think you have to take those guys in the 20s and the late 20s when you can get them, you know, i.e. Trey Murphy. Miami and Isaiah Wong. I wanted to talk about them because they've been kind of, they were slept on at the beginning of the year. I think they lost their first game of the season, if I'm not mistaken. People kind of wrote them off. I think they played a good team. I just can never remember some of these games. It's
They
been
did.
so
They
many
lost pretty
weeks.
early on.
It's
I'll
been
look it
so
up.
many. But Isaiah Wong's been turning it up lately, and this is kind of Julian's little etching his way into the podcast still. That we've just been impressed with Isaiah Wong, and they have a big test with Virginia tonight. The game, if I'm not mistaken, is just started last 15 minutes.
8 to 12
What?
Miami.
8-12?
8-12 Miami. Yep. They lost, by the way, their first game of the year. No, they did not lose anything this year. They lost to Maryland 88-70. That was their only loss.
How
It
early?
wasn't close. It was Lafayette, UNC Greensboro, Florida A&M.
Like first 5 games?
Providence, Maryland. Maryland was the 5th game. Yeah, it's a tough. I mean,
Yeah,
we know what Maryland is.
Same thing. Same thing as the second game, third
A
game.
lot of close games though. Lafayette was close. UNC Greensboro was close. FAMU was close. Well,
Yeah.
no, it wasn't.
They didn't have a great start to the year, but they've been on a flat tear recently.
Correct.
7 straight. If I'm not mistaken,
Yep.
going into
Yep.
tonight.
That's right.
So, it's something to watch. I've been noticing that Norchad Omir has been kind of getting his way in there, getting incorporated into the offense a little bit more. He's been putting up a little bit better numbers. He's just been a monster on the defensive end. That's one of Julian's favorite guys. Not as high on him myself, just because he can't shoot at all. But it is what it is. So another guy was having a good game, kind of a little breakout game. Jordan Walsh, another freshman for Arkansas. We've been kind of keeping tabs on each one of their ascensions. Anthony Black kind of had the first game against Creighton, and then Nick Smith obviously made his debut. Trevon Brazil had his crazy dunk at the earliest point in the year. He was kind of the first guy of this crop of young guys for Arkansas. Ricky Council has been having his games, but we finally got to see Jordan Walsh. It was against a terrible team. Don't even remember who it was, but they were looking to get out and transition more, and I think that was something that I really wanted to see more of them. So far to start the year. I mean, obviously, they're doing quite well. Their, record isn't in jeopardy or anything like that. They're still playing well. Sitting at 10-1. I mean, they're a top 5 team on our rankings. They're number 5. So it's not like they're playing bad, but I think to get to that next echelon of teams, especially in like contention in the tournament, I think that they're just going to have to be a team that they are going to be the one team that gets out and runs every time. And there's teams like that can make really, really good runs in the tournament. And generally and Arkansas has been, teams in the past that have done that. Like they had JD Note and, Eric Musselman's not, unfamiliar to that style of play and that style of coaching. I just think that they need to do it more. I mean? They need to play Jordan Walsh at the 4, and Anthony Black and Ricky Council and Nick Smith and Devontae Davis out there. I mean, they could throw Jordan Walsh at the center and just go kind of wild, just like play him at the Rodman role and just see what happens. I want to see them focus more on getting out in transition, because I think that that's when their team gets to another level, is when that ball is moving quickly. Bodies are flying up and down. They got these 2 6'7" guys with like 6'11" wingspans, and Anthony Black and Jordan Walsh on the wings. They got Ricky Council, who's a freak athlete. And then when Trevon Brazil hopefully comes back at the end of the year, if his year's not finished, I mean, this team's looking quite incredibly unstoppable. I mean, if their shots are falling, I mean, nobody's going to be able to keep up with that team in transition. So I just think that's the biggest thing that they need to do. Now, I don't know if you had any comments about Arkansas, but
I tapered my expectations a lot because preseason, obviously, when you have a team full of really talented freshmen, it's very rare we see them win a national title. So it just depends on how you view it. I also understand when I go, okay, these guys are going to play really hard together because they're really, really good and athletic players. And I think I had to be very careful about, okay, well, one of these guys is not going to have a great couple of weeks because they're, one of them's going to step
Jordan
up
Walsh.
here.
I mean,
Right. And that's exactly where and having him in that range where I'm like, okay, a lot of people are just going to have him free fall off their boards or down their boards. It's like, you can't expect
It
that out
was
of a guy when
one
there's an
guy I
athletic.
really had a hard time doing it to. And
Me
I
too.
think it
That's what I'm
was,
saying. Yeah.
and it was mostly, and I think that this is the thing with that Arkansas team, why me and Julian were very high in the beginning of the year, and why I was as confident to say that, really preseason, I was thinking that Kentucky or Arkansas were going to win the championship. I think Kentucky or Arkansas, I think Baylor and Kansas had outside chances if their seasons fell right, if guys stay healthy. I think Kansas is in that range. If they stay healthy, I think they have a really good chance to win it. Um, Baylor, I don't know. Keontae George, I think is really really good, and I think that I think he's the type of freshman that could win a game in a tournament. But I don't know if they're there as a team. Their front court's kind of mid, but I mean Arkansas especially, and then we'll kind of pivot to Kentucky. But Arkansas especially, why I was so high on these freshmen is because they can play defense. They didn't need that. None of them need to have the ball in their hands besides maybe Nick Smith to add value. You know what I mean? Like they can present value without having to take 10 shots. And I think that that's a big thing that goes underrated in college basketball. And that's not underrated at all with this Arkansas team. And you even talked about it on the pod with Steven with Houston is getting Arkansas points, loose balls, pushing the ball out, making a good outlet pass, stuff like that. I'm making up whatever Arkansas points are, but that's what I assume they'd be is making good outlet passes, getting out in transition, throwing the lob is maybe 2 points or something like that. I don't know. Eric Musselman's got to come up with a system. Make it
All
like
of
the Ohio State thing. Like, can they just
all
like
of
put
that
stickers on
stuff.
their jersey?
Yeah, I guess, but all of that stuff would make a Musselman smile, and that's the whole point. So,
Yeah.
and that's why the Walsh thing is just interesting because he's just so there's so many things dynamically that he can be, and I just think I'm afraid he might get hidden for too long, and I don't think that I hope that doesn't happen. I hope
Well,
February,
speaking of
March rolls
guys that
around.
may be getting hidden for too long, that was a good segue, my friend. I put out a tweet the other day. This is yesterday or 2 days ago on Sunday. And I was talking about a Duthiero who, preseason me and Joanne had talked about on here in the war room when we were talking about Kentucky and even a little bit at different times in our honorable mentions, talking about guys that were really, really deep cut sleepers that could, come up at any point in the season. Otega Owe is one of those guys, Ty Rogers, another freshman. And then, we have freshmen for Kentucky, a Duthiero, 6'6" guard, 4-star prospect, not as heralded as the Wallaces. And but the really interesting thing with Thiero is that he had grown to, I think he'd grown 3 or 4 inches in the last 2 years. So he went from being like 6'1" to 6'6", and over the course of the last 2 to 3 years. And he was a head down, fast paced point guard. And this is a guy that I've liked. I think he makes really really good decisions on the move. I think he's got a unique athletic ability that combines with like just some sort of natural dexterity with the ball in his hands. Just when he is dribbling and moving at full speed, he's just one of those guys that when you watch him, he just kind of glides. He moves differently, and and it's interesting that on this tweet, I wasn't thinking anything of it. I just, I was like, he's played enough time to cut up some film. Might as well do it. Like this is a guy that I love watching. Like I loved watching his high school tape, um, this preseason, and there was an outpouring of Kentucky fans calling for this kid to play. And you had said
Rightfully
this to
so.
me earlier today that yesterday kind of this my tweet had blown up. It got 20K views, not trying to flex or anything like that, but genuinely like it got 20K views, 100,000 impressions. This is the biggest tweet that I've ever had in my entire life. This is the biggest tweet on the clock's ever had. I'm not sure about yourself, but I mean, like I've never had that many impressions on anything, and thinking about how many people have reached, you never know. And so questions were stirring with, Calipari, obviously in some sort of, um, like, obviously there was some sort of questioning that led him to answer, and he said that they're going to give him some more run. It sounds like I think that he's going to get some more playing time. Um, I don't like making like these preemptive claims like this and trying to sound outlandish, but I genuinely think that this is one of those guys where once he gets on the court and starts playing, he is going to skyrocket up the draft board.
I'm with you.
Yeah, I
Can I
I
tell you why
just
I like him though? Can I tell
yeah,
you
go
really,
ahead.
really, truly why? I think he complements Wallace really well. I think
Yeah,
there's limitations Wallace has where like, and my board will reflect that. Just being transparent with you, you know what it is. Don't say anything. But I think Wallace has a lot of really good intangibles as a defender. There's some stuff to be desired offensively, and I think
yeah.
that he can make up for those.
He's I think the thing with Wallace that's been underrated this year is his ability to shoot. I think the thing that got might gotten overrated was his playmaking ability. I think that Thiero brings an element to that team that's going to get them out in transition more. And I think when you have guys that aren't able to create for themselves as consistently in half court, Casey Wallace and Chris Livingston, I think you have guys the young players that can't create for themselves in the isolation or off the pick and roll. Like they don't have those nuances in their game yet. They don't have all the counters that they need. I think I'm much higher on Kaysen and Chris than probably most people are. Like relatively, I have Kaysen. Myself, I have Kaysen as a top seven pick. I just think the defense is that for certain, and I don't think you can teach that type of IQ and ability that he has. And
You
also just
cannot.
the measurables. What?
You cannot teach that. You cannot teach measurables in his defensive ability. I'm with you
No,
there.
no. I
You
mean,
cannot teach that.
when it gets to a certain level where you're like, this guy was just put on this earth to do that, just strap up dudes.
Even
There's
more for me,
corners like it all over the NFL, and there's point guards and wings like it all over the NBA. And I just think he's one of those guys. And when you see those guys, and especially when they're shooting, Trevor, you're not going to believe this, but he was entering that horrific game that he had the other night, shooting the ball against UCLA, I believe. Um, he was shooting 50% from three on the season, over 50%.
no, I'm there. Like I like Wallace a lot, and it was even less about like born to do that. It's more about if I'm an NBA guy and I'm drafting somebody, right? Like what are they going to bring to me? Like can he play on the Suns tomorrow?
Yeah. Yeah.
Defensively, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. He can fill
He's
the
our
campaign
backup
role.
point guard. I might even start him over Chris Paul.
Yeah. Well, not but all that, but like the Pelicans are a perfect example of something like that, where like Alvarado is a guy that plays for them, right? Trey Murphy is a guy that plays for them. Herb Jones, perfect example. I hate to keep using Herb Jones; he's one of my favorite guys in the NBA. But like those guys can play on championship teams,
Yeah.
and I think Wallace is a good example of that. And I think that's why Thiero complements him really well.
Yeah. I think that's a great point, and it's something that I didn't touch on. So excellent bit of analysis there. And I think that raises a really interesting question of, could this Thiero thing shake up some more of the lineups for Kentucky? I think seeing more Chris Livingston possibly, and I think they might try to push pace a little bit more, which I think will help Sheboy a lot. He's super athletic, and I think that if he's able to get on transition more, his effect on the game might even be extrapolated. I think that's the right use of the word. Hopefully.
I like the Sheboy point. I think if they're going to do it, they need to be careful and do it. Start progressively being more on the run because obviously you don't want to guy that's had some ankle issues. You don't want
Yeah.
to like
I
jump
just
right
I
into
think
that.
that's when he's playing the best brand of basketball.
Yep.
When he's
Which
able
they
to
need,
get up and down.
which they can win a national title, like you said. They need him to do that in March,
Yeah.
not in January, and get hurt. So
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
like
absolutely.
I
And
like where we are on that.
yeah. I didn't get to this before. I meant to talk about this earlier, but the NCAA Women's Game of the Week last week, I always take a moment to highlight it just because we spend so much time talking about men's basketball. It's only right that we at least give one game attention to the women's. Um, and there is some great games on the women's side. There was a great game last week. Number 5 versus number 6, Notre Dame versus Virginia Tech, and Notre Dame held Virginia Tech to 29.4% shooting. There was only 7 3-pointers made in this game combined, and I think it was less than 25 attempted, which is a rarity in women's basketball these days. Believe me, most of these teams are shooting at least 15 a game each. Kind of an old style, gritty basketball game, which is always fun. Not a high turnover affair. Both teams kept it in single digits, and Olivia Miles had 16, 13, and 7. Good game for her. So kind of moving on from that, we're gonna go into kind of our picks for the week. Kind of going back over what we had last week and what me and Julian picked. I went 7 for 2 and Julian went 6 for 3. We both got UCLA over Maryland right. I got Kansas over Indiana right, where Julian picked Indiana. We both picked Alabama, which ended up being a major error, as Gonzaga trumped them. We both picked Houston in the men's game of the week last week. Getting over Virginia. We both picked Arizona over Tennessee. We both picked Missouri over UCF. Julian picked Arkansas over Creighton correctly. I picked Creighton. We both picked Notre Dame in the women's game of the week last week, and I picked Arizona. And this is the game that decided it. It was the last game on the slate on the 18th. Arizona versus Baylor. I picked Arizona. He picked Baylor. Arizona got the dub. So week one went to me, which is awesome. And now this is the first week where we'll have a guest. So we're going to go through one at a time. I'll tell my pick. I'll tell Julian's pick. And Trevor, you can tell yours. Sound good?
Sounds great.
All right. Tomorrow we have a battle between North Carolina, number 18 in our ranking, North Carolina, mind you, versus unranked Michigan Wolverines. I got Michigan in this one. I think Hunter Dickinson's gonna give Baycott some problems. Baycott is not, he's came back and he's relatively healthy, but I think that Hunter Dickinson's been one of the more underrated players in the country so far. And I got him. This is our men's game of the week, by the way.
Okay. What does Julian have?
He has North Carolina.
Okay. I'll be short and sweet on the reasoning. I am not a buyer on Michigan at all. I think there are some things there with Jet, but I can't be a Baycott guy all year and then all of a sudden be like, yeah, Dickinson's going to beat him up. I'm just really scared.
I got you.
I'm just scared that I'm just scared that Love and Davis are going to shoot the ball just like crap, and that's going to be what loses them the game. Yeah. I'm going to go with UNC in a close one. I was going to point this out because this game was a lot worse earlier. I'm glad this is not the women's game pick because Michigan and North Carolina are playing right now in the Jumpman Invitational. And at one point when I looked at it earlier, Michigan was up by like 25, and it's now a 8-point game with 20 seconds remaining. Carolina has the ball. They're trying to win the game on the women's side. So wow. I'm very thankful this wasn't the other way around. We'd have been in trouble there. But
yeah. Also tomorrow we have number 13 in our ranking. I'm a big Utah guy. I'm a big fan of the Utes. They're not in the top 25, but they're ranked 13th. That's the highest disparity, ladies and gentlemen, between us and the AP top 25, sitting right there in my Utah Utes. And I got the Utes in this one over TCU. We'll talk about some of the top prospect matchups. We talked about, Baycott versus Dickinson. This one is Mike Miles versus Gabe Madsen, the 6'6", unstoppable, red-haired machine for the Utah Utes. And I got Utah on this one, and Julian has TCU.
As do I. Give me the 30-point Mike Miles game.
Yeah, I mean, I hope that the 5-man, I call it the 5 white man death lineup for Utah, where they have 5 white guys, all of them 6'5" or taller, all of them can clamp, and all of them shoot around 40% from 3.
So basically what St. Mary's did last year.
Yeah, it's pretty sick. They're filthy. Brendan Carlson's a dog. Brendan Carlson's a dog, 7-footer for Utah. His brother Ben Carlson, shout out Mr. Carlson. He follows us on Twitter. You're a good guy. 12-21 Villanova versus St. John's. Julian wanted this to be the game of the week, but I disputed it because it didn't have a top 25 team in our rankings on it. Very dry on the top 25 matchups this week, by the way.
It's Christmas. Who cares? Give my break.
Villanova, I know, will be a top 25 team. They're obviously 4-0 with Cam Whitmore so far, and I think that win streak, we'd assume, is only going to continue in some way, shape, or form. And, I mean, this one's a wash. We all have Nova. So, do you want to give your reasoning behind Nova?
No.
We're going to know that's just amazing. Cam Whitmore.
It's Cam Whitmore, but it's also the St. Joseph game I actually watched because every time I watched that game a lot. It was at St. Joseph, of course. It was pretty close for a lot of it.
Yeah, you were texting about it.
It's nice, though, because it's like, okay, cool, in Philly matchup, yada, yada, yada. I get why I wanted that as the game of the week with Nova, but St. John's obviously is not a team I'm watching a ton of, but
Curbelo.
If a team like if a team like St. Joseph's going to give them a problem, I just, I think Cam Whitmore's good enough to get them a win like that.
Yeah, and I mean, there's a lot of talent on the Villanova roster that just haven't been playing together, and when they have been playing together, they've been winning. So, I don't think any of us are trying to test that. The downfall of the Creighton Blue Jays is just they're hurtling downhill, and it seems like it's not going to stop. We'd all picked Butler in this one. If my phone was able to edit the dock screen from the Drive app, I would have changed mine to Creighton just now. because
Change
I
it
just had a
now. Who
weird gut
cares?
feeling about it. But
Just change it.
I'm gonna change it to Creighton.
All right.
So I've Creighton in this one, and
I'm gonna just say that I think they just look. Sometimes you get kicked and continue to get kicked while you're down. This is the moment we're having with Creighton. They're probably going to win this game, but for the sheer sake that I said Butler was going to win the Big East as a hot take this year, I'm gonna not pick them. I would be dumb to. So I do really think that they can beat Creighton. I think Manny Bates is unbelievable, and I think they have a chance if they can.
yeah,
Really control
Jaden
the
Taylor's a
glass.
really good guard for them. He had a rough game their last game, but I mean they're a good team regardless. We have number 8 Illinois versus number 29 Missouri. I'm a big Missouri Tigers guy. Big Missouri Tigers guy. So my boy Demoy Hodge, he's been balling. He's another one of those guys when you talk about like top usage, or he's actually more on the lower end usage, high efficiency scale. Like he's like a 140 offensive rating on KenPom, but that's a guy, that's a sleeper guy. But obviously Illinois is gonna win this one. I think
Yeah, I'm not. I have nothing to say about it. I think they're going to beat Missouri.
yeah. Kobe Brown is a good player as well. So I mean, shout out Missouri. They've been doing their thing. They were the number one team in the country on offense for a while, which is interesting because they have a lot of defensive players in their roster. Marquette versus Seton Hall. You have Seton Hall.
Yep. I'm not a believer in the Marquette team just yet. I think I want to see how they do in conference a little bit more, but I do like Seton Hall. I think they're coached well,
Yeah,
obviously.
Cam Jones and isn't Shaka Smart the coach of Marquette? Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good coaching battle. I mean, Smart and Shaheen, obviously. So I
So the
think,
two prospect matchups for this one. I don't know if you know Cam Jones, who Cam Jones is that
yeah,
well. He's this year, but it's Cam Jones, Kadari Richmond, and Prosper versus Defo. So those are kind of the two matchups I'm going to be keeping my eye on.
be good to recap that next week.
It'll be a game that we definitely recap, talk about obviously. 12-21 on the women's side. We're kind of moving back in time. If you wanted to know, Butler versus Creighton's on Thursday, as is Illinois, Missouri, and then Seton Hall Marquette is on Tuesday next week, I believe, the 27th.
Yep.
So tomorrow, Duke versus Virginia. Virginia is undefeated so far this year, and Duke has one loss. Neither of them are ranked, though. Women's basketball is so weird. Neither of them are ranked, and one of them's undefeated and a Power Five school, and the other one's a one-loss Power Five school, if not two of the most prestigious basketball schools in the country. This one's a wash. We all have Virginia, the undefeated Virginia Cavaliers, Lady Cavaliers, maybe.
A good test for Duke before they play a top 8 team in the country in women's. They play NC State on Thursday, so before they go on break. So
Good call.
I think if they
Going to
can
that
take care
game?
of Virginia,
Going to Duke? NC State?
last minute maybe. I haven't decided yet. We'll see what happens the day
Fair
of.
enough.
But if we don't have Diamond Johnson back, then no, I'm not going to that game.
Yeah,
They'll lose by
she's a
20.
great player.
But no, I think Virginia's a really good team, and I think Duke's just not going to be able to handle them defensively.
Yeah. Same thing tomorrow. Florida taking on number 23 Oklahoma. I'm not familiar with Florida. I've
Me
heard
neither,
more stuff about
unfortunately.
Oklahoma and some of the players on that roster, and just kind of how they play. I'm pretty sure there's a big styles clash here. I think one of these teams, I think Oklahoma plays with a lot of pace. I was looking at it before. They play with a lot of pace where Florida doesn't. So I think it's going to be defense versus offense. I kind of got Oklahoma in this one.
Yeah, I'll just be the college football fans will appreciate this. When they pick college game day and they point at the bottom, and someone takes a screenshot, so when they all pick the same team and they lose, they look like idiots. I just wanted to pull a Curve Street and be like, yeah, you guys all pick the same obvious team.
Yeah. I get what you mean. The meme.
That's my Florida pick. I have no idea why, but that's it.
Yeah, no, I mean that's fine. I did the same thing almost for the Creighton thing, but it was also just because I got a weird feeling over me that Baylor Sharman's gonna have a big game. So
The last
Cal
one's
versus
easy,
Cal versus number 2 Stanford.
yeah,
is
we
a
all went
wash.
Stanford. Yeah,
We all have Stanford.
that one was pretty easy.
Yeah, so that was pretty easy. This episode went a little bit longer than I was kind of expecting, but I mean there was honestly more to talk about than I kind of was anticipating with the big games that happened this past Saturday. and some of the narratives that came out of that. This is kind of a really pivotal point in the college basketball season. A lot of these teams a lot of the teams in the country are starting to move on to their conference schedule, and a big conversation that me and Julian have been having, especially surrounding around our top 25 ranking, is where do a lot of these mid-major conferences kind of fall, and when we start looking towards later in the season at what teams are going to be making the tournament and what teams can make a run, what are some of the Cinderella stories that we can anticipate even at this point in the season. And it's been difficult to kind of decipher because a lot of these schedules have been very volatile. I mean, even just looking at the two Florida teams, Florida State and Florida, both had upsets early in the season to Stetson, and teams like San Jose State and Troy. And, Florida State's had their struggles, but they're starting to bounce back and get a couple wins here and there. So, it's just going to be interesting to see once all these teams start playing the teams that are actually supposed to be kind of more the equivalent matchups. We'll start to see the mid-majors teams kind of separate and distinct themselves. Some of the teams off the top of my head that I've been really enjoying lately is like Furman, obviously with Lawson and St. Thomas, Minnesota. New Mexico with Jamal Mashburn Jr. I don't know if Delaware's got Jameer Nelson Jr. There's a lot of NBA players' kids. I mean, another connection that I made, Tyler Johnson's brother, as well as Jalen Johnson's brother, brothers are both in college basketball right now. It's just the college basketball landscape just feels very connected right now, I think. And
It's one of the best years in a long time. I love the
yeah,
NBA connection that you made. I love those kind of guys.
yeah, dude, it's so cool. I mean, just the layers and the depth. I mean, even touching back on that Adu Thiero, I mean, shout out Amani Thiero, who's Adu's father. That's going to be a great basketball family. They got a 6'4". His younger sister is a freshman in high school and she's 6'4". So the Thiero family is going to be around for a while, and it's cool to hear little stories about that. It really shows that this game is such a connector for a lot of people. Like not only fans and really all sports can operate that way, and it's why we come together every week to talk about it here at 6 Month Madness. So I appreciate you joining us, Trevor. If people aren't familiar with you, they really should be. But as always, kind of plug your stuff. Obviously the links will be down below.
Yeah, I'm got a lot of cool stuff with the NBA. My plug is actually for the NBA, not for my channel. So NBA All-Star voting today. Your homework is to go vote SGA into the All-Star game because he deserves it. Had a buzzer beater last night. All jokes aside, got a lot of really cool stuff coming. By the time this is up, I believe
It'll be tomorrow morning.
Okay, so then never mind. When you hear this, check my feed the next day because you'll see a really cool interview with Alex Golden from the Pacers Podcast Network. Super cool to have him on tomorrow. Looking forward to that. NBA All-Star voting. My big board will be out January 1st. Looking forward to discussing that with you guys.
Yeah, we have more stuff coming with On the Clock going forward. Since the last time we spoke, we've had a lot of conversations behind the scenes about kind of the stuff that we're starting to work on. With winter break for me from school coming up the next couple of weeks, you should expect a little bit more content, at least from me and Trevor. You might see our faces together a little bit more often without Julian or, vice versa with Julian and myself or Julian with you. So we're all just trying to make the best basketball content we can. But I will be back next week for another week of 6 Month Madness, ladies and gentlemen. We're off the clock.